This is Pulse of Africa, the face and voice of Africa. The story of resurgent and burgeoning Africa is here, only on the Pulse of Africa channel. Pulse of Africa, the face and voice of Africa.
Good evening, I'm Tinsai Gabriel and this is POA Evening News. Stay with us for more stories shaping Africa and beyond. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urges bold climate action at COP30. Secretary General Antonio Guterres has made a strong appeal for urgent climate action, warning the world is a critical turning point. Speaking at COP30 in the Amazon rainforest, he said the future of the nature and humanity are closely connected. Guterres stressed that global leaders must act quickly to stop rising temperatures and protect fragile ecosystems. The science is clear, he said. Keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is still possible, but a temporary overshoot cannot be avoided. We must act now to make that overshoot as small and as short as possible. He called on rich nations to keep their promises on climate finance and to help developing countries which suffer the most from climate change despite contributing the least. He described any delay in action as indefensible, especially when forests and oceans, the planet's natural shields, are at risk. His remarks echoed demands from vulnerable nations for fair climate justice, including debt relief and access to clean technology. Standing in the Amazon, a symbol of both strength and fragility, Guterres delivered a clear message. The fight to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees is a fight for survival, and half measures are no longer enough. Morocco-Rwanda strengthened military ties during high-level visit. Morocco's Royal Armed Forces hosted Rwanda's army chief to advance military cooperation between the two countries as part of a growing partnership that aims to boost security across Africa. General Mohamed Barid, Inspector General of Morocco's Royal Armed Forces, received General Vincent Nayakarundi, Chief of Staff of the Rwanda Land Forces in Rabat. The meeting took place under the direction of the King Mohammed VI, who serves as Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the General Staff of the Royal Armed Forces. Nayakarundi's working visit runs from November 10 to 14 and builds on a military cooperation agreement the two countries signed in Rabat in June 2025. According to the statement from Royal Armed Forces General Staff, the agreement covers multiple areas of military collaboration. During the talks, the Rwandan military leader expressed his deep satisfaction with the strong bilateral ties between Morocco and Rwanda. He described the visit as a crucial step in developing military cooperation and said it provides valuable opportunities for exchange and consultation between the two armies. Both military leaders reaffirmed their commitment to continue and expand their partnership. They stressed that this cooperation will help build lasting and exemplary military ties between their forces. The two countries share a long history of bilateral relations, which have grown significantly stronger since King Mohammed VI's historic visit to Kigali in 2016. The King's visit laid the foundation for their expanding partnership as the two countries have consistently worked to deepen cooperation across agriculture, trade, and political matters while addressing strategic challenges facing Africa. South Africa starts clinical trials on first locally developed oral cholera vaccine. Researchers and scientists in South Africa on Tuesday have launched clinical trials on the first domestically manufactured vaccine in over 50 years. The oral cholera vaccine is being developed by Cape Town-based pharmaceutical firm BioVac. It is currently undergoing trials to determine its safety in adults and will be followed by trials to compare it to existing cholera vaccines that are already in the market. The South African government has described the clinical trials as a milestone in Africa's ability to produce vaccines for itself. Vaccines made in South Africa usually rely on active pharmaceutical ingredients imported from abroad. If our vaccine works, we'll be the second producer of the oral cholera vaccine at a global level, and we can help support global distribution and help support places where there are outbreaks, said Professor Glenda Gray, the Chief Scientific Officer at the South African Medical Research Council. South Africa's Health Minister, Aaron Motsoaledi, said the vaccine could be approved and ready for use in Africa by 2028, depending on the results of the clinical trials. The ability to manufacture a life-saving vaccine from start to finish right here at home strengthens our national capacity to respond swiftly to potential outbreaks and enhance Africa's self-reliance in vaccine production, he said. The World Health Organization estimates that as many as 4 million people around the world are affected by cholera every year, with between 21,000 and 143,000 people dying from it annually.
Only through a credible, impartial system of rules can Africa's trade rights be properly protected.
African countries often feel marginalized during WTO negotiations, where their concerns are frequently overlooked or ignored.
How we can increase our competitiveness in international trade. So, we are lagging behind in many things.
The World Trade Organization faces a pivotal moment, one that demands bold, inclusive reform if the WTO is to fulfill its promise of a fair and equitable development for its own members, especially those in Africa.
Women and Social Affairs Minister Argogi Tesfaye of Ethiopia said protecting children is not a charity. She said it is a strategic investment in Africa's human capital and collective future. The Bogota call to action called for urgent, coordinated action to strengthen laws and policies, address risks, and secure collaboration to safeguard children's rights and well-being. It outlines a commitment to accelerate the implementation of proven solutions. The three-day conference, launched under the theme Advancing the Bogota Commitments to End Violence Against Children in Africa, focuses on advancing the Bogota commitments made last year to end violence against children. It offers a crucial chance to turn global promises into Africa-led actions, guided by principles like the African Charter on the rights and welfare of the child, it was pointed out. Speaking on the occasion, Women and Social Affairs Minister Argogi said, protecting children is not a charity, but a strategic investment in Africa's human capital and collective future. The minister emphasized the importance of child safety for Africa's growth, outlining Ethiopia's national efforts, including the creation of a national child protection system, expanding community-based protection services, and improving the social service workforce. These movements reflect the country's strong commitment to child welfare, she stated.
We have established a national child protection system, integrated intervention, response, and rehabilitation services. And we have expanded community-based child protection structures that empower local actors to identify and respond to violence at the grassroots level. And we have also strengthened the family welfare and social services workforce, equipping professionals with the capacity to deliver psychosocial support and ensure effective referrals.
Minister Argogi highlighted progress on the Bogota pledges and noted that coverage under the Early Childhood Development Nurturing Care Framework has increased from 15% to 19% by 2025. Coverage for child protection case management has also jumped from 2% to 6% during the same time period. UNICEF Ethiopian representative Abubakar Kampo said, Ethiopia shows what can happen when the government and partners work together with a strong purpose and commitment.
Ethiopia demonstrates what is possible when government and partners act with shared purpose and sustained commitment. As we mark the 35th anniversary of the African Charter of the Rights and Welfare of the Child, let us renew our commitment to ending violence against children in all their forms in Africa, to achieve a continent where every child grows up safe and free from violence. Together, we can and must be the generation that delivers in Africa where every child grows safe, free, and full of possibilities.
WHO Ethiopia representative Kasolo Francis stressed that the need to transform promises into actions. The promises we make need to turn into real steps, and these steps should lead to real changes, he said.
The World Health Organization emphasizes that violence prevention is not peripheral to health. It is integral. Health facilities are often the first point of contact for children affected by violence. The sector therefore plays a unique role not only in identifying and treating victims, but in generating data, guiding policy, and fostering intersectoral coordination. Yet health cannot act alone. Justice must uphold accountability. Education must empower and inform. And social protection must extend care and support. Ending violence against children demands, therefore, a whole of society and a whole of government approach, underpinned by strong governance, sustainable financing, and community ownership.
He praised countries like Zambia and Ghana for progress in integrated child protection systems. For Ikram Siraj, a child rights advocate and former child parliamentarian, poverty itself is a form of violence and urged governments to not depend on outside help to keep us safe.
I ask you to move from commitments to actions. We call on our leaders and the people sitting here to prioritize preventions, invest in parenting programs, promote positive discipline, and strengthen the community-based networks that protect us from harm before it happens. Empower child and youth voices. Expand and crucially resource child parliamentarians, child groups, youth platforms, so we are able to influence the national and the regional agendas that decide our future.
The conference aims to build a clear, actionable strategy focused on safety and support for all African children. The spirit of Ubuntu, I am because we are, we will guide Africa toward a future where no child is left behind. Now to business news. IMF praises Zimbabwe's economic growth in 2025. The International Monetary Fund has praised Zimbabwe's economy for performing better than expected in 2025. The IMF says strong results in farming and mining, along with better economic management, have helped the country recover and grow. IMF resident representative in Zimbabwe, Dr. Daniel Gurara, said inflation has gone down, confidence is rising, and business activity is improving. He noted that growth could be higher than the earlier forecast of 6%. The key now is to keep discipline in government spending and continue reforms so that this rebound leads to lasting growth, he said. Dr. Gurara explained that tighter monetary and fiscal policies, along with stronger revenue collection, have supported stability. However, he warned that risks remain, including global uncertainty, limited external financing, and climate shocks. Economist Dr. Zach Murarwa added that Zimbabwe should continue its engagement with international partners to build trust and attract more support. This is a positive step that can shape the future of the nation, he said. The IMF team recently met with Finance Minister Professor Mutuli Nkumbe, Reserve Bank Governor Dr. John Mashayavanu, and other senior officials during its Article 4th mission to Harare. Algeria-Russia Business Forum, a springboard for new partnerships. Algeria-Russia Business Forum, a springboard for new partnerships. The Algeria-Russia Business Forum convened under the patronages of Ministry of Foreign and Trade and Export Promotion. The forum served as a platform to explore avenues for enhanced economic cooperation between the two nations. Participants emphasized the need to intensify efforts to expand economic cooperation into new sectors. Speakers highlighted the existing foundations for stronger economic ties and increased bilateral trade, advocating for partnerships beyond traditional areas of cooperation. Key sectors identified for potential growth include smart agriculture, pharmaceuticals, renewable energy, and digital solutions. Abdusalam Dajanid, Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Export Promotion, stated that the forum presents an opportunity to enhance coordination and joint efforts to leverage the potential within both countries across various fields. He specifically mentioned opportunities in energy, agriculture, and food security. Janit also highlighted the promising prospects within the industrial and technological sectors, pharmaceuticals, digital transformation, and development of the artificial intelligence solutions, and smart agriculture. He affirmed the significant progress in trade relations between Algeria and Russia, driven by a strong political will and a growing strategic partnership. He noted that trade volume has more than doubled in the first 10 months of 2024, exceeding $1.7 billion. This puts us on a shared ambition path to reach a total trade volume of $10 billion by the end of this decade, Danjanit added. Ahmed Azimov, president of the Algeria-Russia Business Council, noted that the forum provides a valuable opportunity for economic actors from both countries to overcome obstacles and identify new areas for collaboration, partnership, and exchange of expertise. He emphasized the role of the newly established council in fostering economic cooperation, facilitating reciprocal visits for economic operators from around 500 companies. These interactions are expected to culminate in agreements for the future exports of Algerian products to Russia. Finally, marathon legend Kipchoge calls on Africa to use AI in sports. Marathon legend Eliud Kipchoge has urged African countries to embrace artificial intelligence, technology, and innovation to protect the continent's sporting success and prepare for future challenges. Speaking at the Kenya Software and AI Summit 2025, at Moi University Annex Campus, Kipchoge said sports must adapt as the world changes. The question today is not who can run the fastest, but who can adapt the fastest, he told the audience. Kipchoge explained that AI and data are transforming how athletes train, recover, and perform. Technology will not replace discipline, it will refine it, he said, adding that it can turn effort into insight and preparation into precision. He also highlighted the impact of climate change on sports, recalling how rising temperatures affected athletes at the Tokyo 2021 Olympics and Paris 2024 Games. He stressed the need for smarter systems to help athletes cope with such challenges. Kipchoge urged African nations to lead in digital innovation, noting that by 2030, 42% of the world's youth will live in Africa, with millions of digital jobs expected. He encouraged young people to learn digital skills and uphold ethics, saying success without integrity is just speed without direction. He called on policymakers to include digital and climate literacy in schools and to invest in solar-powered stadiums, tech-enabled training centers, and data-driven facilities. Kipchoge also announced his upcoming seven-continent tour aimed at spreading a global message of unity and adaptation through sport. Africa is not running dry. Africa is setting the pace, he declared. Let's take a look at the current forecast and what conditions to expect across the region. That's all from POA News of the Hour. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more updates from Africa.
The global marketplace represents a multifaceted system where goods and services are traded across national boundaries. It encompasses a range of mechanisms and strategies, including international marketing, trade agreements, and market dynamics. However, this international framework has not been functioning effectively, particularly for developing nations, for an extended period. Within this imbalanced global market structure, developing countries, particularly Africa, has consistently faced adverse treatment. Consequently, the Marrakesh Agreement, which established the World Trade Organization (WTO), acknowledges the necessity for proactive measures aimed at ensuring that developing countries, especially the least developed, obtain a fair share of the growth in international trade that aligns with their economic development needs. The WTO has implemented various initiatives specifically designed to assist African nations in becoming active participants and beneficiaries of the global trade system. To this end, the WTO has allocated substantial resources to African countries to enhance their trade capacity and infrastructure. This support promotes economic diversification and industrialization, driving economic transformation throughout the continent. Furthermore, the WTO offers comprehensive technical assistance to African nations, concentrating on areas such as trade facilitation, regulatory compliance, and intellectual property rights. Additionally, the WTO's multilateral trading system grants African countries access to global markets, allowing them to integrate into international value chains and capitalize on emerging market opportunities. This access promotes economic development, job creation, and poverty alleviation by enhancing trade flows. Nevertheless, African nations have expressed dissatisfaction with the organization for not offering sufficient assistance in addressing their complex relationships with the global market. This issue is tied to the continent's historically entrenched and structurally intricate challenges, as well as its long-term developmental requirements. This situation has manifested in various ways, leading African countries to often feel marginalized during WTO negotiations, where their concerns are frequently overlooked or ignored. Although African nations represent over a quarter of the WTO's membership, 44 out of 164 members, they frequently perceive themselves as excluded from the organization's decision-making process. Mazid Nasser, a senior researcher at the Ethiopian Economist Association, has further strengthened the argument that African memberships don't bring the expected benefits.
Given the disparity between in terms of continent-wise, in terms of country-wise, in economic and development indicator like industrialization base, technology advancement, and so on and so forth things. So there is huge disparity, particularly within the member countries. So in WTO, for example, 28 countries like Europe is represented by one voice. So African countries has 44. Some of them are, of course, observers. Others are full members. Even within African countries, like 5 or 4 countries are benefiting from WTO. Others are, of course, simply they are members.
Additionally, African nations have raised concerns that the WTO's dispute settlement mechanism disproportionately impacts smaller economies on the continent. Due to existing power imbalances, these countries encounter difficulties in asserting their rights and effectively resolving trade disputes. The current crisis, influenced by power disparities with major trading partners such as the United States, the European Union, and China, further complicates matters for African nations. Moreover, the dysfunction of the appellate body has intensified these challenges by restricting Africa's capacity to appeal decisions. The Uruguay round has faced criticism for exacerbating Africa's economic difficulties, as trade liberalization has undermined the continent's comparative advantages and intensified developmental issues. This is especially apparent as Africa loses its preferential status and enters into asymmetric trade competition with other nations. African nations have recognized a variety of implementation challenges that require attention, including the application of anti-dumping measures and insufficient technical support from wealthier countries. African countries have encountered significant developmental deficits, struggling to establish the legal and administrative frameworks necessary to implement trade regulations, while their domestic industries have been adversely affected by an influx of cheaper imports. Despite attempts to rebalance and reform their economies, many African nations continue to encounter escalating trade obstacles. In addition, African countries have raised concerns regarding the use of intellectual property rights to patent living organisms, which jeopardizes their control over essential genetic resources for agricultural production. This has significantly affected the continent's economic activities, as agriculture serves as the foundation for its development. Overall, the economic crisis in Africa is deep-rooted and requires the active engagement of all relevant stakeholders to create the prosperous continent envisioned by Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. In this context, the World Trade Organization should undertake meaningful and practical reforms to address the long-standing grievances of African nations and thereby contribute to the continent's development. These reforms should advocate for a functional and independent dispute resolution system, highlighting the importance of reinstating the appellate body. The WTO must also accommodate special treatment and easier access for African countries within its framework, acknowledging their developmental challenges. Furthermore, the organization needs to effectively address the systemic imbalances present in trade agreements and provide sufficient technical assistance to enable African nations to adhere to trade regulations. The reformed WTO should also consider the continent's developmental priorities, promoting diversification of production, integration into global value chains, and the establishment of robust infrastructure to support digital trade as a means of fostering economic growth. In addition, Mazid argued that African countries should also work to create a robust industrial base and build competitiveness in the manufacturing sector. He also recommended that African countries work more on research and development to increase market competitiveness.
How we can increase our competitiveness in international trade. So, like we are lagging behind in many things actually, in technology, infrastructure, in communication, a lot of things. So, we have to be moved slowly even. So to do that, basically we have to be invest on research and development and infrastructures as well, because even within Ethiopia, from one region to another region, there is significant variation in price of some commodities because of information, because of lack of infrastructure. We know it, that one. So the same is happening in African countries. So there should be a kind of facilitating trades that may be at easier cost, at less cost to provide to the international market. So like the information asymmetry issue, the infrastructural issue. The most important one is basically we have to be invested on research and development.
Despite facing criticism, numerous African nations remain dedicated to the World Trade Organization, viewing it as an essential platform for advocating a more equitable global trade system. Africa's efforts to advocate for reforms, such as the restoration of the appellate body, highlight the continent's commitment to a multilateral trading system founded on inclusivity and the rule of law. It is therefore imperative for African countries to support the creation of a vibrant and effective WTO that promotes a functioning world trading system that benefits all and contributes to a stronger global economy. As their primary trade partners adopt varying strategies, African nations must also navigate a complex trade environment influenced by power imbalances. In light of the challenges and complexities, African countries must persist in collaborating with other WTO members to address the issues afflicting the organization. As one of the least developed, yet highly promising regions globally, Africa has significant stakes in ensuring a robust and fully operational WTO.
The ongoing economic crisis in Africa makes it clear that the status quo of the global trading system is insufficient. At the centerpiece of international economic governance, the World Trade Organization faces a pivotal moment, one that demands bold, inclusive reform if the WTO is to fulfill its promise of a fair and equitable development for its own members, especially those in Africa. A reformed WTO must embody the spirit of the Marrakesh Agreement in practice, not just their rhetoric. Despite their significant representation within the WTO, African nations continue to be excluded from critical decision-making processes and suffer from the legacy of structural imbalances in global trade rules. This has hindered their ability to compete on an equal footing and entrenched a pattern in which Africa's potential is persistently underutilized and its voice marginalized. Therefore, WTO reform must deliver essential outcomes. First, the dispute settlement mechanism, including the vital appellate body, must be fully reinstated and made accessible to African nations so they can effectively assert and defend their trade interests against larger, more influential economies. Only through a credible, impartial system of rules can Africa's trade rights be properly protected. Second, reforms must operationalize the principle of special and differential treatment for Africa, providing more than just technical assistance and addressing deeper needs such as capacity building, policy space, and technology transfer. These measures are vital for Africa to advance industrialization, diversify its exports, and integrate into global value chains, thus breaking its historical dependence on commodity exporters.